I'm very excited about introducing our next guest this afternoon. The next topic is one that's near and dear to many of our hearts. This whole idea of social, digital, and mobile strategies comes up for many of our clients and ranges from my own personal experience to working with clients who are completely confused and extremely chaotic in their approach to how to deal with finding this talent, to those that are very engaged and very curious, but don't know exactly what they're looking for either. It's been, I think, one of the more interesting elements to what's been happening in search lately. And we're very lucky today to have somebody with such great, robust experience to address this topic with all of us today. I can tell you from personal experience that sometimes you start these searches and this spec that may start on day one could change literally on day 60 or 90. And those are very common themes around educating our clients and getting really much more familiar with what's happening in this new digital era. But it's also very interesting to look at how this is affecting our own view of leadership in this area. And I think that our next guest, Barry Libert, is going to help us through this discussion today. He is a noted author, board chair himself, strategic advisor, and an investor in this space as well. So let's all give a hand to Barry Libert and welcome him to join this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I get all of you to stand up for a second? If you might, I'd like you to say hello to the person to the left and right of you as if they don't matter, as if you have no relationship with them, as if you will not be able to search them out this year for a career placement, and therefore they're likely to fall deep into your database. And you won't basically worry about that data set until the next search comes up. And because they're not part of your network, you're just in the transaction business, and they're not part of this year's income statement for you, they really don't matter to you. Can you say hello to them next door to you so they don't matter to you? You're not going to do business, no cheating. You'll notice for a second the energy that exists when there is no social connection between you and the person with which you are sitting, and in which you don't really understand the risk that is about to take place. If you're Rush Limbaugh and you say something about a young woman because you don't realize the power of social media, and the network is now bigger than your company. In fact, it's bigger than your nation, and as a result, these networks, which didn't exist before that we gave birth to, can create undue risks for your organization, your board, and your future. If you can take a seat for a second. Let's look at some statistics and see whether or not that little test we just did together applies to any of your activities and how you think about business. So I think about it very simply. Social and mobile networks are eating our world at an accelerating rate. And they're doing it in a way that none of us fully appreciated less than a year ago. It wasn't even clear. So let me ask you all, if really social and mobile networks are large, people say, well, how powerful is Facebook? So I asked them a simple question. Anybody want to guess what 1 billion people can do in China to America? Anybody want to tell me what they can do to our economy? They can stop lending us money. And if they stop lending us money, what happens to our economy? We're gone. What do you think 1 billion people on Facebook can do to any company and any country today? My argument would be the exact same thing. We don't know the power of 1 billion people. So let's just look at some of the statistics. 1 billion people. China. 1 billion people. India. It only took a few thousand years for, since Christ, 1,000 years to do, or 2,000 years, 1 billion basically Catholic people. Mark did it in less than 8 years. Less than 8 years. From a simple thesis that all of us are of the human kind. Let me repeat the words. Of the human kind. Unless any of you disagree, there is no other kind of humans that I'm aware of. And I have plenty of executives and boards of which I work for, and I'm not so sure they're from the human kind, at least not the kind I know, but of the human kind. And then Twitter comes along, and they're going to reach the size of America, and LinkedIn is 150 million people, and they're doing it on a simple thesis, that all of us want to connect. Nothing more powerful in our lives. What happens? Apple comes along. Let's not forget, more than a decade ago, Microsoft had to spend $150 million to bail out Apple, just to create a competing operating system. And now Apple, with today's announcement of iPad 3, has passed the $500 billion mark, with more than $100 billion cash on hand. And let's not forget the numbers. 25 million of us are going onto their iCloud every single month. And let me give you some more thing about cloud computing. $89 per person per year is spent putting content into the cloud. Let me repeat the number, $89 per person per year. Let me give you the other statistic. 75% of the world carries mobile devices just like I do, and if all of you saw me in the back of the room, and I spent all of my time on my classroom, in my knowledge base, with my friends and fans, and Government Motors, otherwise known as GM, the largest car company in the world, is not even a tenth of the size, and the largest oil manufacturer is less than 20% of the size. So the question is, what's more valuable to us as humans, oil or information? Connections or cars? Good question. So what can 1 billion people do? Can they gobble entire countries? How about states and governments like Madison, Wisconsin? How about political campaigns? Can they gobble entire organizations? What can they do to companies? Can they fundamentally change the economic profiles of an organization and its capabilities? And can they do it in such a speed and in such a way that, like McKinsey taught me, I hate to say, 35 years ago, it's never the competitor you can see that eats your lunch. It's the competitors you can't see. What happens to industries? It only took 50 years for the newspaper industry and the book publishing industry to return to its roots. Pretty cool. They were built to last, just built for the 1950s. Now, what's interesting to me is I was talking to the Spencer Stuart guys. They're doing 24 digital director searches. I started OpenMatters last July because I realized, having done social media starting in 1995 for AT&T's board, Alan and Walter and Michael Armstrong would try to convince me that they were going to own the last mile to your home. I said to Alan and Walter, they were spending $1 billion for a year in consulting with my alumni firm, McKinsey, my brother's alumni firm, BCG, my son's alumni firm, Bain, that they could. And I said to Alan and Walter and then Michael Armstrong, no chance in the world unless you're Paul Revere. They said, how's that? If 1 by sea, 2 by land, 3 by air, 4 by satellite, 5 by what? I don't have any idea, but you're not going to own the last mile to my wife. It's not a possibility. Those are my relationships, not yours. And you don't know what the last mile looks like. I told Michael he was going to go bankrupt. He did, 2 or 3 times over. AT&T is not AT&T, it's SBC. They were a network, capital N. 75 million people talking to 6 million businesses. That's what they were. They got their purpose wrong. They were not a ping and pipe company. They were not a telco. They were a connection company. And even at $110 billion of market cap, when I got them an offer of $80 billion, it wasn't going to save them. They forgot what they were in business to achieve. So let me thank you all for setting this speech up fantastically with our opening comments, and they did a great job for us. There really are 4 things that any business can do. Only 4. So my friend Jim Collins is wrong. Who's ever read Built, any of his books, Good to Great? He always says, get the right people on the bus. Well, let me suggest to you there are 4 buses your clients are driving. One bus is a sinking ship. Last week I was at New York Stock Exchange business, well-known publisher. You all know them. They're located here in New York. And they said, Barry, we're a $3 billion business. One of our businesses is shrinking at about 18%. It's about $2.25 billion. The other portion of our business is $250 million. It's a digital business. What are we going to do at the director level and the CEO level? And I go, excuse me, we need to not put bus drivers on sinking ships. Because someone who can navigate the ship's descent and a board that can navigate the ship's descent is not a bus driver. He's a submarine expert. He understands how to navigate the descent and wants to navigate the descent at a speed and a rate which makes value for those shareholders. And they have some buses too in this particular company. It's a slow-growing business. But they have some interesting ideas, upper left, where that Einstein vision of there's some innovative activities are growing at different speeds, and they have some starships. They have a digital business that's growing at 30%. Any group of people that can drive a bus can't fly a jet and are unlikely to steer a sinking submarine. So when you do your searches, I'm going to argue the most important thing you can do is to think about Nike for a second. So our first message is, this is not a question of hypothesis about the digital world. The networks that we spawned, and the reason we spawned them is because we didn't want them. We turned them over to Mark Zuckerberg. We didn't want customer networks. We wanted products and services. So we, without knowing, outsourced our networks, our customer and employee relationships to Mark. We just let them sit there fallow because we didn't really cherish them and their connections, because we didn't really invest in the boards and the leadership and the competencies to make them ours. And all that Mark did is walked into the void. You don't build a business with 1 billion customers if there's not extraordinary pent-up demand. Extraordinary pent-up demand. And not just of youngsters, but of my wife. The fastest cohort is my wife. So Nike realized in 2006 that they weren't where their customers are. And in 2010, they created Nike Digital. And their simple thesis is, we want to be where our customers are. So what do they do about it? They moved $800 million of spending to where their customers are. Facebook. Mobile. Anybody who runs in here in the audience? They didn't just decide to put you on mobile. They gave us devices to put in our shoes so they could follow us around wherever we go. They embedded mobility in our daily activities. They recruit 100 to 200 people a year just for their mobile digital activities because they want to embed digital in what they do. And then they made it video because they brought it to life. In every aspect embedded in their clothing, in their capabilities, in their business processes, in their design. If you read the article in Fortune in February, it's called How Nike Got Its Mojo Back. You can see now their designs, but you can't see their Nike digital department. It's completely confidential because it is where the sauce is of their business. It is where the expertise and knowledge is. It's where their networks and constituents are. It's where their proprietary data is. They're like a big search firm. a massive search firm with tens of millions of people being sought out by them every day so they can create another relationship, to search for another customer, to build another relationship so they never lose track of you wherever you are. You might as well call it Nike Search, retain search for that matter, because they retain all these customers in the moment. It's in their DNA now, and these are the economic benefits of it. They doubled their revenues, quadrupled their EBITDA, because they realized digital was the core of everything they do. How many of you have kids? Let me ask you a question. For those who have kids, I grew up in a time and a place. I grew up here in Westchester, New York. I'm the son of a West Pointer and a finishing school for women. My parents tell me all the time when I was growing up, you will call home on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And I've been doing it ever since I've been a kid. Now, my kids went off to college. I have a 21 and 24-year-old. And they said, you know, it's amazing, Dad, for all these years we've known you, you continue to call home. I said, I'm like E.T. They said, we'll call home on Sunday mornings at 9 as well. Now, how many of you believe that statement? How many of your kids call home? Any hands up, how many call home? A few of you, fantastic, your kids still call home. Great, you've trained your kids well. Now, I had a view that said, gee, I'm in the digital world. This is a long time ago. They're not going to call home. They won't even be awake at 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings. There's no chance. In fact, I knew them. They were coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning when I was getting up at 5. There's no chance they're going to be up at 9. I said, because I realized they were my customers, different than I was my parents' customers. This is a very important message. Then in my world, remember who I was born to, it was their way or the highway. How many of you had those parents? Okay, you were all brought up by my parents, right? My way or the highway, as long as you live in my house, it's my rules, yada, yada, yada. I always say my parents taught me well, stand straight, eat a square meal. This is what my parents taught me. Never tell a lie, yada, yada, yada. I got it all. My parents would say, why do you always apologize to your children? The first thing is because my parents never apologized to me. And the second reason is I'm a human. I'm of the human kind. I make mistakes. And the third thing, if they're my customers, and I want them to love me, and I mean it, profoundly love me, that I'm going to live on their terms. I'm going to communicate with them using their mediums. I'm going to find ways to be present in their lives in their ways. And that's the result of me understanding that and the way they deal with me. My peers always say, how come your kids treat you that way? I'll never forget when they were growing up, they say, why do we have to tell you everything, Dad? I say, don't tell me anything. And then they immediately blurt out, here's what we got to tell you from today. Because I made sure I was present in their lives in their way. In their way. So thanks for Tom, who reminded me of the Alcatel-Lucent comment that every company today is at its heart a technology company, and every single leadership team needs a technology disruptor, if not two. How many of you do board work? How many of your boards have core technologists who have lived and breathed the technology world like I have for the last 2 decades? Let me give you statistics from NACD. Ken's not here. 4.6% of board members are technologists. 6.5% of board members are strategists. How do you think that a board can coexist in a digital world where my kids say we live online when there is no technology know-how in their ranks? It's like saying I don't need to have any finance skills at a board. I don't need to have any investor skills at a board. We heard today from FTI, which was spectacular, thanks for that setup, that 65% of board members, of recruits come from inside an organization, and 70% come from inside their industry, but 85% of all risks come from outside the network now. How the heck If there are no skills inside these organizations, could they find the competencies for these new capabilities among their ranks? They don't exist. If the risks exist in the network, because the networks are bigger than the companies and countries that forge them, then the competencies are in the network as well. So let me turn it over to you. What questions do you think you want to help your clients ask to help them understand that the networks that were forged by us, due to the fact that we let these constituents connect because we didn't want to? What questions should we be helping our clients ask so that they're equipped for today's reality? Anybody any thoughts? What questions that we should ask? No questions. Fantastic. How many Facebook followers as a board member do you have? That's a good one. First, you have to ask them how many of them are on Facebook, and then you can ask them if they have any followers or what it even means. That's a good one. Any other ones? Sure.
You can ask what the blogs say about the company.
Fantastic. Ask them what are bloggers saying about their company and whether or not they know or read a blog. Sure, question.
How are they utilizing Twitter?
Fantastic. How are they using Twitter and what do they think about? When I was at Cannon's event, NACD, at the national event when I was with Tom, I only asked one question, but I made a mess at NACD. They were talking for an hour and a half about risk mitigation and the length of a minute, length of corporate minutes. And I asked, why aren't corporate minutes 140 characters? If we can write everything else in 140 characters, I don't know why corporate minutes, and why we should only spend 140 characters on talking about corporate minutes. And I'm serious, because I'm on enough boards to know minutes create risks. So keep it short. Next question. Sure.
Do you have a mobile or social strategy?
Do you have a mobile or social, I'll add cloud strategy, because we're going to talk about some risks in the cloud in a minute. Do you have a mobile, social, and cloud strategy? Great question. Any other questions? Sure.
How about LinkedIn affect your talent acquisition strategy?
Fantastic. How are you thinking about acquisition strategies with regards to, and I'm going to say broadly, what are you acquiring? Because people don't think yet about acquiring networks just to propel their business yet. Great question. Any other questions? If you think about some of the questions, and I had a really good conversation before, the questions are core to a business's purpose. So let me give you, I think, the 4 questions you should all ask of your clients. It's called the 4 Ps. We already covered them today in both of the prior sessions. The first one is purpose. Do you have the right business strategy and the right business model for today's digital reality, for today's network society, for today's flat world, whatever words they like to use, for today's connected organization, for today's extended enterprise? Do they have the right business strategy that sees the whole, including the network, as a part of the pieces in which they engage? The next one is people. Do you have the right people, I didn't say on the bus, I'll say on board? Because when you say the bus, it immediately sets up a mental model. But if you said to them, like at this New York Stock Exchange company, I was talking to the CEO, he was with a search firm that had brought me in for this board search, and he was complaining to me, the CEO, that he couldn't find the right CMO, in fact, Chief Revenue Officer. A very famous search firm you guys are representing here today. And I was down there with this New York Stock Exchange CEO, and I said, how many CROs have you interviewed in this search? And he said, we have 289 on the spec. I said, 289, that's very cool. Have you seen one yet? He says, no. I said, why not? He says, well, I can't find the right person. I said, let's look at the spec for a second. And I'm not a search professional. You got 1,500 field salespeople, a telesales organization, and a web marketing department for a $2.25 billion publishing organization that's shrinking, a liquidating trust, as I called it, and a digital business growing at 30%. Any great digital marketer, or let alone chief revenue officer, who really understands the digital world will not want to listen to, manage, develop, cultivate 1,500 field salespeople. In fact, as far as he's concerned or she's concerned, they never want to touch a field salesperson. They just want to deal with web leads and web conversions and understand that they are now web salespeople. And the telesalesperson does not understand the web organization nor the field sales organization. There is no such an animal. He turned to the search organization and said, I want to break it into 3 searches. That is the right answer, because those are 3 different buses. Getting the right people on that bus, maybe they can find the one person 289, but I really think that is a complicated, not well-defined search. Processes. Embedding technologies like Nike does in everything it does, including its clothing, is true for every business. Every business process is technology enabled. Think about it for a second. Anybody do any CFO searches? If you think about your CFO searches, most of my CFOs do not get RevRec. They don't even get ACV or TCVs. They don't even get the fact where an ACV or TCV lives on their balance sheet. Now, remember, I was a board member at Anderson, so I'm not an accountant, but what I just gave you is some definitions for business model definition that exists in what's called subscription revenue models, which is how do you defray risk by having visibility into new business models that have what's called annual contract value, total contract value, retained deferred bookings, deferred revenue. Understanding the economic DNA of a business model as a finance person so you can help your CEO and board get visibility into your future so you have the right business architecture is critical. So getting the right processes, and those are just finance processes. We haven't talked about marketing processes, sales processes. God, we can go on and on. Manufacturing processes, distribution processes, you name it. Getting those things right mitigate risks and generate value. And the last one is the most important one, financing and potential. Anybody know what a hard asset company trades at as a multiple of revenues? Manufacturing companies, what they trade at multiples of revenues? About 1. Anybody know what services company trade at, like search firms, as a multiple of revenues? 1, says Tom. That is correct. That means the companies that are in the, I'm going to show you in a minute, the 2 business boxes called industrial age and the services age trade at their current revenues. In the other 2 boxes, which is software, which is the codification of our intellectual capital, and network capital, they trade at between 3 and 5 times revenues and 7 to who the God knows the value of a network. I don't. So getting that right goes back to 1955. Anybody ever seen this picture before? Bruce Henderson, 1955. When you talk about searches, you need to ask your clients, what are they trying to achieve? Do they want to be a doggy business? I always ask this directly of my CEOs and boards. Are dogs good? Cool. Some dogs are cool. I like dogs. Doesn't make them to me. But a dog is an interesting business. If you're really going to be valuable as a search firm, ask them. How do you like being a dog? Does it feel okay to you? Would you like to be a cash cow? Or maybe a question mark? Or for that matter, a star? What's your aspirations? How would you like to define the economics of your organization? And the reason you want to ask that of them is because they are aspirational. People have aspirations. And understanding their core financial aspirations begins to define your search. It is arguable that as a search professional, and I don't think this is true, that you can just solve the one thing, like a PT professional, right? Physical therapist. I might have a problem here. There's a great expression in physical therapy. Where you think it hurts, it ain't. It's possible that what they think is their problem is not their problem, that they're wondering why their industry is under attack, why they're not getting the revenues growth they need, and why it is that their financial margins are shrinking, and can you go fix that with a new CFO or a new CTO or a new CMO or a new CLO or a new CEO or a new, keep going. And that may not be their problem. It may be a lack of their ability to articulate closely for you what they're trying to achieve. And having the simple context from 1955, Bruce Henderson, BCG, what it is they're trying to achieve. The second is, we just heard the problem from FTI. Great. If the markets are creating external risk, there's a people map now. I'm going to keep showing the same map, but different activities. If the market is creating external risk for you, but you're doing inside-out searches. Remember, we just heard this, 75%. What is the number? Where's the FTI wonderful gentleman? Where's this?
77.
What's the number?
77.
Fantastic. Thank you for that statistic. You've added tremendous risk information for me. He's just said, we know that outside in, think you can put your models in this, you can use, I want to exchange PowerPoints. He's told us that outside in, upper left is creating risks for the enterprise. But 77% of the ultimate searches come from inside out. And they're reactive in nature, lower left, not proactive. Remember why Steve Jobs used to say, he used to fight with his board, Eric Schmidt used to say about him all the time from Google. He used to say to Eric Schmidt, you don't understand technology, if you read the book and listened to Eric Schmidt's interviews. Because what Steve was saying is that today, businesses will be consumerized. And Steve had a view on what that would look like. We would carry it with us. We would make it and carry it with us. Our families, our friends, our information, our education, our commerce, our products, our capabilities, our networks, our insights. So how can you have inside-out searches when outside-in is creating the risks? Let alone if Steve used to say, being great is not what matters. Being different is what really creates value. Defining a market is what creates value, not reacting to a market. So you'd ask them a question. Let's just be direct as a search professional. We can add and want to add value to you. But if the risks are coming from outside in, do you really want us to do an inside-out search? Is that what you really want? Do your professionals and people have the network skills to adapt to today's network realities? Processes. When you're doing a search, you want to ask the next question. What processes are we trying to enable and or disable? Are we trying to make better manufacturing processes, information or call center processes, data, big data? Anybody dealing with big data searches yet? Cool, 1. Anybody else? 2, 3. It just tells you companies are not yet in the data world yet. So when I go into big boards and ask them a question, what's your data cube look like? And they go, what are you talking about? We have a listserv. We have an email list. We haven't taken care of that list in a long time. But we're still hitting it and wondering why our conversion rate is 1 or 2% or less. So I said, what does the data cube look like? What is it supposed to do for us? How are we supposed to think about it? What is the data structure supposed to accomplish for our business? So we can think about it holistically. How are we going to use it to effectuate our customer relationships, our employee engagement, our shareholder value? What does it mean for our partners? Another big New York Stock Exchange company reached me a month ago and said to me, Barry, we're well known. You guys know this name too? A well-known content player. One of our board members is asking for what our partnership strategy, and he keeps hammering us. What's our partnership strategy? What's our partnership strategy? And I say, listen, it's a really good question. To answer the question, you need to have a data structure. He's the board member and CEO, says, why? I said, because to bring in partners and to make them valuable and valued, like Apple does. Remember what Apple did is it turned the model upside down. They gave 70% of their revenues to their partners and only kept 30% for themselves. Microsoft was 80% for themselves and 20% for their partners. Jobs turned it on its head. To build a partnership strategy, you need to have a data structure because you want to be able to tell your partners that who they're targeting for a specific product or service is being targeted based on a set of data structures that inform their partnership decisions. Because otherwise, all they're doing is hitting your list like you're hitting your list. This company is so well known, I said to him, everybody, and the board said to me, but everybody wants to talk to us. I said, that's correct, because your brand is so big. But you don't know how to monetize your brand because you can't think of yourself as a portal to other people's capabilities because you don't know anything about your customers' wants and needs. You don't really know them. Therefore, you can't offer the customer something of value, and the same thing to your partners. So what's happening to you as a brand is everybody recognizes you are a portal more than you're a content play. You're an app exchange, in the words they don't think of themselves. You're an app portal. You're like Salesforce.com for the content business. But because you don't realize your data structures, you can't help people deal with the last part, the human network. And then what about the financing? Depending on how you've asked your questions, are you clear about your purpose for this search? Do we have the right people defined for this search? Are they engaging in the right processes, CRM, SFA, all the today's nomenclature? Have we put the right capital against it? Go back to the board, the big publisher. I said, listen, your board is no longer properly organized, but neither is your investors. The people who want to invest in your $250 million business don't want to invest in your sinking ship. Those are bondholders. He says, it's so funny you should say that. My bondholders don't want me to invest in my digital business. Correct, because bondholders don't want digital businesses. They want their cash flows. These are banks. They're not venture capitalists. So getting the spec right helps them achieve their goals, and it creates relevance and value for your industry. Because then you can say to your search committee, your leaders, your clients, I'm different than my peer group. I understand your business model, first thing, purpose. I don't think that there is one bus driver for every type of business model. In fact, I would argue as a leader, as a search professional, there isn't. So let's get the spec really clear. We're searching for a sinking ship, and there's nothing wrong with sinking ships. Searching for cash cow. We're searching for some really cool question marks. We're searching for stars. Are we doing it from outside in or inside out? Which process are we trying to solve? Customer retention or engagement? Employee knowledge and transfer? Crowdsourcing? Open sourcing? And against what set of investor returns and rewards? Cash flows? Equity? Growth? Venture. Because it will define for me to help you, my client, what it is you all need. And when you call again, you'll remember that I really do understand your business in a way that I can add value again. Questions? Questions? No questions. Concerns, go for it. What's the concerns? Lots of concerns. Good one, I like that. There are a lot, when you really see, how many of you do yoga? Cool, quite a few of you. You know, yoga is a big industry now. I was hurt about 2.5 years ago. I was crippled, didn't walk for about 1.5 years. It was a terrible experience. Not walking and being crippled, you should try it one day. In fact, honestly, you shouldn't. But here's the important message. When I started walking again, after massive surgeries, the first person I went to see was the yoga meditation stuff, and they used to say, Barry, you really need to do an inversion. I said, how about just walking? An inversion is a headstand. The digital world is creating an inversion for organizations. It's changing the dynamic, the DNA, the business purpose, the processes, the people, the activities. And what we all have to offer is very thoughtful feedback to our clients about how to help them. They may not be ready like I wasn't and still not to do an inversion. But helping them understand what is the reality of dealing with customers and CRM. Turning that on oneself so that you can think about how you as search professionals would use this in your business to extend your brand and your networks by building your data businesses. understand the risks that were just outlined today so you recruit the right people, and accepting the reality that 4.6% of board members are technologists. The average age of a board member is, whether it's 64 or 62, and 92% are men and white. I always have to remind my kids of Title IX. Anybody remember what that was? What was it? What was it? Let's say that again.
Sports for girls.
Girl stuff. Come on, guys. Girl stuff is making equality for women stuff. Remember the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA? My boys always say to me, that was passed, right? Anybody remember if it was passed or not? No. According to statistics, it's still not passed at boards. They forgot ERA somehow. And anybody know the statistics about women on boards and what happens with women on boards in terms of economic return? It goes up. It goes up. I can send you statistics. I'll send it to the team. It goes up. Women on board members drive economic returns because they value relationships. And they're constantly asking the same. How many of you are married, guys? I didn't say women. Men, hands up? Okay, including girlfriends, men? Married and girlfriends? It goes up. Relationships matter in a network world. It goes up. And making that core of a board conversation, what's our retention rate? What does it look like? How are we interacting? How many times we interact with our customers? When's the last time we interacted with these customers? Same thing in search. How many times we interact with this candidate? When's the last time we interacted with this candidate? Can I look at the number of interactions? Asking your CTO. How many interactions did we manage this month? Across how many people? Any other questions? Sure.
What in your mind should search firms do? What in your mind should search firms do to embed mobile, social, and cloud, not to become dogs?
Ah, very good. How many of you search firms are public? Anybody left? There you go. You guys know the economic value of your business. Search firms, consulting firms, remember I trained at McKinsey, are wonderful cash cows. They really are. They produce EBITDA that generates returns, economic value per unit, for their partners. But in a public setting, they are not. Services firms don't work well in a public setting because investors are smart. They don't want cash flow businesses. They either want businesses that produce cash flow for debt instruments or they want growth enterprises. They don't want services firms. If I haven't told you something you don't know, let me know. I understand why we thought we should do it at 2001. There was a good reason to do it at 2001, but the economic long tail on it is 1.12 times revenues. Don't be public. The second one is, if you want to have something of value, you do. All of you have large databases. All of you touch the lives of somebody in some period of time. All of you, Donald Trump is wrong. Getting fired hurts. When he says don't take it personally, it's absolutely personal. Everything is personal. When you're hired, it's personal. When you're fired, it's personal. When you receive bad returns, it's personal. When you receive good support, it's personal. When you like somebody, it's personal. When you don't like someone, it's personal. It's all friggin' personal. You're in the personal business. So if you think about your business as a database business, I'm going to turn it on head. I'm doing a headstand now. As a database business in which you live your lives and getting your data architecture right and investing your data architecture with digital board members and just repeating back and getting your purpose right so you can go from 1 times revenues to, as I say, start with the end in mind, as McKinsey taught me in 1977. I want to be a 7 times revenue business. No reason why a search firm can't be. Millions of people in your database, you touch their lives and well-being. You have mobile and social networks. You haven't yet enabled them yet. You have partners that want to partner with you to touch both your end users, your content, and your content is like the names that you hold. That is your content. It's extremely valuable, not just to you to do your search, but to Apple did this right. They used AT&T's channel to put their content across. You have content that is valuable. Next one. Question. Go for it.
How do we manage the P2P relationships in our business? Because it's huge We have
Huge, that's correct.
thousands of
Finally.
people trying to connect with us. It's impossible to connect to everybody. And then how do you think about that?
So I'm on the Wharton board. And I've been giving the same speech to Wharton since, I'm not even a Wharton alum. I'm a Columbia and Tufts alum. I'm on the Wharton board since 2004 or 5, because I wrote this book called We Are Smarter Than Me, which was the first ever book using a wiki and 5,000 people to write a book. That was chaos, right? For Pearson, Marjorie Scordino. We were trying an experiment. And every year I've said to the Wharton board, I got to tell you, I love your 259 faculty, but who gives a crap? There's 675,000 people in the Wharton alum. Anybody of you a Wharton alum? There's 675,000 Wharton alum networks, friends, and followers. 675,000. At the last Wharton board meeting, finally the president of Dow wakes up and stands up and says to me, Barry, I'm in the B2B space. You've asked me an important question for 5 years running. How big is my network? What can it do? We're an old line chemical company. I'm realizing, what can't it do? So finally the CMO calls me one day and says, I don't know what you did to our CEO, but he's driving 120 CMOs crazy now. He wants to know the size of our network, who's talking to who, what they're talking about, what type of new inventions can they create, how often are we interacting with these B2B networks, what does the B2E network look like, the employee networks? I think B2B is cool. It's really cool. To answer your question, you need to start the conversation with them and see what they're capable of doing so you can manage the risks and rewards. B2B is still P2P. It's still person to person. Business is about individuals trying to achieve their well-being. Their well-being. And B2B keeps thinking there's some different face to humanity and humankind. It's just individuals trying to achieve their goals as salespeople, marketing people, employees in an organization. And they're all carrying, in the B world, one of these. Don't think differently about B2B versus B2C or B2B2C. It's just individuals. That's what Steve Jobs was saying about Eric Schmidt. It's just individuals trying to achieve the best they can in their lives. That's all they're trying to do. Any other questions? I'll ask you all to stand up for a second. You are all now indoctrinated into the social network of AESC. And I want to remind you of something. Whether we ever meet again or not is irrelevant. What's relevant is Tom and Brian and Andrea called me one day and said, will you help us create a connection? And we had a lengthy conversation, Brian, about what type of connection should we form to help search people understand how to use this in their business or to create a connection with them and their clients, because it's not the same discussion. You all have a connection now. What I want you to know is to greet the person next to you with care and kindness, with understanding that they are dear friends and they're individuals in the B2B world. And you met them today, and there's a good chance that you'll want to meet them again. And Brian and Andrea and Tom were facilitating. They were just social networkers, organizing your social event today to share among each other your caring for each other, the data that you can have with each other, the compliments you will offer to each other, and the ability, I know you think of yourselves competitors, as compliments, that you can take home these lessons and use them in your business to search for the best people by providing fresh, new, relevant content to your clients. Say hello now to the person next to you as if they matter, and you never want them to lose them in your world. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. Hands up for every one of you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you all.